Ladies and gentlemen, moving ahead with the program, next we have another interesting keynote speech in line. So today at MSDC 2021, we are honored and privileged to have the presence of Dr. Elliot Peel as a keynote speaker. And Dr. Elliot Peel is an associate professor at the School of Journalism, Media and Culture at Cardiff University in Wales, UK. Before moving into academia, Dr. Peel was a newspaper journalist and an international marketing and public relations consultant. And Dr. Peel has worked in publicity teams for David Beckham and a range of other celebrities, as well as leading international marketing communication campaigns, such as Lonely Planet, Gillette, Adidas, and Pioneer. His research and teaching interests focus on promotional culture, celebrity culture, and physical culture. So today, Dr. Peel will be talking about on the topic Attention Capitalist, a cultural history of the influencer. So now it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Elliot Peel to address you all.
Hello, everybody. Greetings, and first of all, thank you for the kind introduction, Sith. That's very nice of you, and appreciate that. And it's good to be with you. I'm based in Wales, which is part of the United Kingdom, and maybe where you're sitting is a little bit warmer than it is here. The sun is shining, but it's a little bit chilly. Anyway, there's a lot of warmth I feel in the room there, so I'm happy to be with you. I've got a number of things that I want to go through in terms of the points I want to get across today. And I'm not going to try and use PowerPoint to kill you all to death, because I'm sure that you would have seen a number of PowerPoint presentations. So I'll be talking through an essay. I've written an essay and points that I want to pull out from that, and to make it as accurate as I possibly can, and just follow that sort of academic tradition, really, rather than putting a PowerPoint up and then going behind that. As I go through, I won't be able to really look at chat, so we'll have any questions afterwards. And if you don't feel that you won't want to think about the information and maybe come back to me later, please feel free to reach out and contact me. In terms of the research and the work that I'll be talking about today, it's very much from a Western-centric perspective. And in the introduction, you would have heard that I've done publicity work for a range of global celebrities, but I also, previous to that, was a newspaper journalist. So I understand the whole process of storytelling, story building, and also the process of when you shift from one side of the fence to another side of the fence, and in a sense you're developing reputations and also protecting reputations. And my interest in the influencer really stemmed out of that. And from my academic work over the last 10 years, I developed a module in celebrity culture at the School of Journalism at Cardiff University, and that is for an undergraduate program that's well supported by students, and with a particular focus, one, to understand both the theoretical aspects of the area of celebrity culture, but also, importantly for me, the practical side also of how celebrities are created, and obviously as part of that, how influencers are then created as part of that mechanical process. So what I wanted to touch on today is some of the research I've done and some of the thoughts that I have, but I want to take you back to the historical perspective and look at an arc really of where we've arrived at the point today with the influencer culture we have. In a sense, you could argue it's an influencer economy as part of the broader attention economy. So we'll be talking about those points, but as I'm going through this, I'm very interested in developing research partnerships with developing these themes and these notions, particularly around promotional literacy, so an extension of media literacy, and also analyzing influencer culture in different parts of the world. So I'd be very interested if people have particular interest in developing research partnerships and bids opportunities by looking at influencer culture, how it develops from an Eastern perspective. So I just put that out there for you to have a think about. So I'm going to take you now on a sort of a journey that starts at the sort of graphic revolution time, end of the 1800s. And I'm going to try and talk about some rapid technological development at those times, and then move that into looking at the work and the techniques used by, probably in a sense, the sort of founding father of the modern day influencer, a gentleman called Edward Bernays, to look at the role and the development of the public relations industry and a range of other promotional industries. And then we're going to move that into the rise of digital technologies, and then also the development of the other promotional industries such as marketing, influencer marketing, look more broadly at the attention economy. And then I'll bring it into, and I'll apply that to some cases as well. So sort of 4 cases really to identify the impact of influencers, how brands are using influencers, look at the value of the market and why it's important to us. But certainly from my perspective, from a pedagogical perspective, I want to really talk and get across the point that I think we need as an academy to extend the notion of media literacy into one of promotional literacy, where students and people who are moving into the industries of, say, journalism and of marketing understand the process of creating influencers, why they're created, and who they're created for, and on whose behalf, and also to analyze critically how important and central they are to the social lives that we have today. Certainly from a UK perspective and a European perspective, an example of that is where influencers have been used widely by the UK government and European governments to communicate issues around the COVID-19 pandemic, where traditional forms of communication, say communication from politicians, had very little relevance, had very little authenticity to certain target audiences and certain groups. So a range of influencers were used, in a sense, micro-celebrities were used to connect with those disparate audiences in terms of trying to make people understand and not so much buy into, but understand the processes that were unfolding. So it's very interesting, I think, the arc and how central influencers are to the social lives we have. And I think it's going to be a very, very rich area for researchers as we go forward. So let me just now turn to my notes, and I'm going to talk through these as I find that it gives me a sense of making sure that I'm accurate with you. So yeah, I'll begin. So the first point I'd like to highlight is a specific historical development of today's influencer. And I'll talk about the sort of etymology of the word influencer a little bit later. So I'm going to start with the historical bedrock and build and give some sense of how and why we are where we are today. So one of the things that the first element I would look at in terms of looking at the cultural history of the influencer is very short. However, like inventions, there are many roots and developments in cultural history, forming a maze-like arrival at the influencer landscape that we have today. And you might have influencers that you connect with, you feel are authentic, that are meaningful to you. And in a sense, that's quite an extension of celebrity studies and the way that say Olivia Driesens describes this celebrity landscape and the whole notion that celebrity and celebrity landscape is a series of people, or celebrity culture is people making sense of the social world around them, but through celebrities and through influencers. So I now intend to take you on that journey, examine and explore the rise of the influencer, ask how this phenomenon was invented and by whom and for whom. Just to give you some sense of the economic benefit or the economic influence of the influencer landscape, Forbes estimates that in 22, so next year, the economic market for the influencer will be worth £11 billion. That's British pounds. So in terms of a market, that is globally significant. So that gives you a tip as to why that market is attractive and lucrative for people who want to use their own media channels to create and talk about things that are of interest to them and potentially of interest to other people. So during the course of this story, and a bit to help understand and explain the influence of phenomenon, I will apply and think about and talk about celebrity theory, explore the attention economy. I'll cite Andrew Vernick's work, and also later the extension of Aaron Davis's work related to promotional culture, and look at the work and also the inventions of cultural intermediaries, that whole notion of people who work in the cultural sector and the type of work they do. In a sense, it's quite hidden. And part of my work that I try and do is, from an academic perspective, is highlight the different forms of work and the tactics and techniques used by people who work in the cultural industries to create influences and to create a celebrity landscape. I'll also present highlights of academic work related to the influencers' use of social media also. So I thought this would be the most helpful way for us to dissect the rise of influencer culture and understand its history in a bid to explain the next steps in influencer culture. One of the issues I would have thought that we should be thinking about and considering, and certainly it's something that is an aspect of the area, is regulation. The rise of the influencer and the potential of the individual to monetize their media channels has largely happened because there's relatively little regulation compared to traditional forms of media. Of course, that is changing as a range of other social pressures, political pressures, and other forms of behavior in the social media universe sort of unravel effectively. So there's clearly a push for more regulation, and I will talk about one aspect of that regulation in a case I'll talk about a little later. So let me take you back to another time when the tectonic plates of media technology, like today, were changing and shifting with dramatic outcomes. The time is defined, or I define it, as the graphic revolution in the late 1800s. And here we can understand how, why, and for whom influencer culture was invented. So if we just take a little bit of time back to think about the ages of the forms of invention, which were, in a sense, the bedrock of the digital technologies we have today. So the telegraph was invented in 1844, the telephone, 1876, radio, 1901, television, 1927, and then talking, and what's known as the talkies, and film creation, development of the celebrity actors moving out of silent movies into talking movies, 1928. So here, like today and tomorrow, rapid changes in media technology had profound effects on the society with the development of mass media and the ability to influence the masses. It was these technologies that I previously mentioned that gave rise to Edward Bernays' seminal Influencer Bibles, Propaganda in 1928, and The Engineering of Consent book, published in 1955, following an earlier essay in 1947. In this work, Bernays, the nephew of famed father of psychoanalysis Sigmund Freud, said that the influential could use a range of technologies and media tools with associated persuasion techniques to shape the minds of the masses. And what's quite interesting from a modern day context, and I think it's interesting in terms of media reach, that another relative of Sigmund Freud is a gentleman called Matthew Freud. Matthew Freud is a well-known or developed a well-known celebrity public relations agency in London. And he is now married to Elizabeth Murdoch, part of the Murdoch, or Rupert Murdoch's daughter. So you can see how something, in terms of persuasion and influence goes through time and the connections that brings us. And I just want to give you an insight into the thinking of Bernays at the time, just to see or think about the type of influence that he'd had in terms of his thinking. He was very important at creating propaganda campaigns that persuaded people and men to fight for the US in a range of wars. So this is chapter 1, Organizing Chaos, and I just want to pull out a few paragraphs because I think it's important to understand the thinking around this time, which in a sense forms the sort of the the managed marketing industries that follow, and also then the rise of specific influencer culture. So the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. It is they who pull the wires, which control the public mind, who harness old social forces and contrive new ways to blind and guide the world. In theory, everybody buys the best and cheapest commodities offered him or her on the market. In practice, if everyone went around pricing and chemically testing before purchasing the dozens of soaps or fabrics or brands of bread which are for sale, economic life would become hopelessly jammed. There is consequently a vast and continuous effort going on to capture our minds in the interest of some policy or commodity or idea. So you can see in these words the sort of foundation stones really of why people seek influence, but also why the rise of individuals as influencers has become important, because you have a certain media power and you can present ideas and you can present link-ups with a range of brands and a range of products. But I'll go into that a little bit later, the practical focus of that. So Bernays used Freud's research, citing the complex and hidden depths of the human mind to manipulate both the rational and irrational behavior of human beings. Bernays first used these techniques of mass persuasion or influencing as a propagandist working for the US government, making a case for US men, as I mentioned earlier, to enlist in the First World War. His techniques were so successful that he said that if these forms of persuasion could be used in wartime, they could be even more powerful in peacetime. So Bernays, in the early 30s, established a firm in New York where he specialized as a counsel in public relations. He said that nobody liked the word propaganda later in his years, so he invented a council on public relations. It was out of this new industry, PR, that the base techniques used by today's influencers, I would contend, were invented. A classic case to highlight and understand these techniques of mass persuasion is Bernays' Torches of Freedom campaign used for an American tobacco company. And I'll just give you a little bit of background on that, because I think it sets the tone for the type of storytelling that influencers undertake today. The tobacco company, one of the largest in the US at the time, had a business problem. Women in the US at this time did not smoke and would not smoke in public. The firm had no access to half of its potential market. The business, had no access to half, 50% of its potential market. Bernays approached a number of psychologists to understand why this was the case. They undertook interview research, and what they discovered was that men had invoked a social taboo against women smoking. It was not seen as something women should do. How do you break this taboo? Asked Bernays. He was told he must persuade women that smoking would make them more powerful, and that the act of smoking was both defiant against male taboos and would give them a new sense of freedom. Freedom being the important word of this campaign. So Bernays took this research based on an understanding of human behavior and developed a campaign for the company, and he called this campaign Torches of Freedom. The central idea was to create an event that would shock audiences. So we see this today, and a range of influencers will carry out shock tactics to gain attention. So the central idea was to create an event that would shock audiences, gain widespread media attention, and make smoking acceptable to women. So what did his team do? So this gives you some idea of the type of techniques used by the cultural industries to, in a sense, manufacture celebrities and manufacture influencers. Bernays asked a number of wealthy debutantes at the time, so they were, in a sense, supermodels of the day, or beauty influencers, if you like. And they asked, the team asked these debutantes to join the traditional Labor Day March in New York. And when signaled, this is usually held at the end of August, so a summertime, bright. just before everybody goes back to work, the 1st of September. And it's a celebratory day of the working man in America at the time. So the debutants were asked then to join the traditional Labour Day march. And when signalled, they were asked to light up their cigarettes and present what is described as their torches of freedom. Of course, Bernays and his team had already sold the idea to the New York press, and photographers were waiting to capture the unique moment. Causing such controversy, the pictures spread rapidly across all US media in the days and weeks that followed. So you can imagine if that was today, we're talking seconds, but in terms of the technologies that were advanced and significant at the time, this was a story that sort of leaked and then seeped and then worked across the country over a period of time. So the pictures spread rapidly, and in the weeks that followed, creating a discursive narrative related to women's civil rights. As a result, the social barriers that had visibly held women back from smoking had been broken down, and women from that day began to adopt smoking as a social pastime. Clearly now, with the information that we have and the research that we have related to smoking and the health issues that it causes people, that wasn't there at the time. So we're talking at a time of early 1930s US, and I think this sort of quite nicely brings out some of the key points I'll talk about a little later. So what were the components of this mass persuasion? Story, memory, and emotion, said experts and academics reviewing the example of a tactic known as a stunt in PR terms. A stunt tactic is employed to create as much attention for a product, a service, an issue, cause, or a person in order to meet an economic or a political objective. So I'm trying to unpack, in a sense, the hidden industries behind the celebrity industry, or that has given rise to the celebrity cultures that we have, and also as part of that, the influencer culture that we have on a regional and a country and a global basis. The influential, described as power, persuading the influenced audiences and consumers. And we see this narrative right through the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and into the new millennia. I'd like to introduce the notion of, or the person, Guy Debord, the late French Marxist, who's a lot of his work that I've used in some of the research I've done, applying it particularly to the sport of surfing, professional surfing. And Debord was a French Marxist and a situationist. He identified these stunts carried out by cultural intermediaries as a series of spectacles, and as a never-ending sea of shaped and managed visual culture, invented and created to avert the gaze of the individual or the consumers and audiences of the masses, so power could get on doing exactly what it wanted. He outlined this process in his seminal work, The Society of the Spectacle. If people haven't interacted with that work, it'd be interesting for you to have a look at that, particularly how it relates to influencer culture, and using some of the research and some of the points that he makes in the Society of the Spectacle to look at today's visually saturated society. Andrew Boorstin referred to these spectacles as created pseudo-news, created by cultural intermediaries on behalf of paying vested interest groups or clients. Andrew Vernick and Aaron Davis broaden Debord's positionality and Boorstin's pseudo-news by updating the broad scope of the cultural intermediary and the role they play in the formation of invented social life. Just to give it a little background, these cultural intermediaries, or promotional intermediaries as Davis calls them, comprise labour working in such industries as public relations, advertising, marketing, native advertising, influencer marketing, content marketing, sponsorship, and also political lobbying. Davis outlines the spread, client spend, and influence of these workers to persuade target audiences to think in a particular way, to perceive a product in a certain way, buy a certain service or branded good, and most of all, persuade others on the brand's behalf to follow the same pattern of consumer behavior. So you have this hidden notion of a range of academics shining a spotlight on a range of cultural or promotional intermediaries to try and get a sense of how is our celebrity life, our social life constructed, and how therefore is our influence central to that. And I do a lot of my teaching, if I work with students who are taking our practice-based journalism programs, have very, very little understanding of the techniques and the tactics used by these cultural intermediaries. And we're not talking about people who are poorly educated or who are people who just buy and sell things. These are highly educated, highly intelligent, impressive people who are structuring and developing what Bernays identified as story, campaigns, memory, to connect authentically brands to certain audiences. So it needs to be understood by journalists, by children going through their senior school, to understand the critical perspectives linked to influencer culture and content marketing culture that we have today, and understanding the roles that these cultural intermediaries or updated promotional intermediaries play in the world that we're in today. So here we see the professionalization and the commodification of these promotional practices emerging in the 1950s, and then developing rapidly, tracking the march towards and linking with and tracking the march towards global economic globalization. Implicit, I would argue, in all cultural intermediary work is the formation of influence to shape the way others are influenced. And certainly being involved in that from a celebrity representation perspective, and as a publicist, I really do see that. Not that you set out to manipulate, but you do set out to storyfy, to create an agenda, and to present that agenda in a particular way to a set of specific audiences that have been targeted. So that's why I think it's important for us to extend the whole notion of media literacy into promotional literacy. So before we turn the spotlight toward our developing promotional culture and the rise of the modern day influencer, let me just pause, consider and define some critical aspects of the promotional industries as highlighted by Davis. And this is a short extract to give some critical engagement as to why we need to think about these things. So this is from a paper that Davis gave in 2013. Promotion appears everywhere, so much so that we no longer notice. This is not just about explicit selling and buying. The promotion arms race has seeped into all fields, powerfully reshaping individuals, organizations, and our wider society. Without realizing it, we have found ourselves living in a time of promotional excess. By that I mean a time when the practices of public relations, advertising, marketing, branding, and lobbying have infiltrated much of our everyday existence. In the 21st century, such promotional activity and its outputs have become ubiquitous. Promotion appears everywhere, and at the same time, we no longer notice its presence. It is common to ask questions about how finance, globalization, digital technologies, and war shape our world, but no one really asks much about our promotion-saturated world. So these are sort of some of the bedrocks really that I feel are important from a pedagogical perspective in terms of the academy, and applying this and shining a light on an understanding of how these industries work in order to help educate the consumers of tomorrow. So let me just look at some critical definitions of the points that pulled out there from Davis's elements. He talked about marketing. So marketing is described by the American Marketing Association as the commercial activities and processes used in creating profitable products, goods and services for markets and audiences. If we take that further by describing a brand and defining what a brand is, a name, term, design, symbol, or any other feature that identifies one seller's goods or services as distinct from those of other sellers, an asset generating significant economic value. So when I talked about at the start, the Forbes note of the industry being worth on a global basis for influencers of £11 billion, we see the whole rationale of why organizations under the auspices of its marketing techniques and campaigns, and in order of brand building, why they want to connect with influencers in this space or want a piece of that market. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail earlier. Public relations. Again, the description of that is the organized management of relations between an organization and the audiences on which that organization relies upon for its survival. Content marketing, a technique of creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content to attract, acquire, and clearly defined audience with the objective of driving profitable customer action. So you see what's coming out here in a range of different descriptions of the promotional industries that support influencer culture. We see in brand, the asset generating significant economic value. We see public relations, the organized and management relations between an organization and a set of audiences on which that organization relies upon for survival. Content marketing, a technique to attract and acquire a clearly defined audience with the objective of driving profitable customer action, so people buying things. And then we move into influencer marketing. The Association of National Advertising in the US describe influencer marketing as focusing on leveraging individuals who have influence over potential buyers and orienting marketing activities around these individuals. So they could be mega celebrities, they could be micro celebrities. Depends on your targeting of your particular marketing campaign. So IM is focusing on leveraging individuals who have influence over potential buyers and orienting marketing activities around these individuals to drive a brand message to a larger market. In influencer marketing, rather than marketing directly to large groups of consumers, and I think this is an important point, a brand inspires or compensates influencers. These could be celebrities or could be content creators, as we see on YouTube, or we see those on Insta, we see them on Twitch, and we see them on Weibo, or we see them in a range of other platforms, to get the word out on their behalf. So influencers are very much a part of a marketing campaign, a marketing range of marketing techniques, and identify influencers as just a channel to get to their target audiences. So that's why I think it's very important to understand the whole notion and concept of promotional literacy, because the global marketing industry has identified influencers as a very powerful, very strong way of targeting the audiences they're trying to connect with. And there's a number of reasons why brands do that. One, research tells us that influencers and micro-influencers and micro-celebrities are trusted more than brands. There's an authenticity that allows conversations and story, so going back to emotion and story, the points that Bernays made earlier, that sort of allows influencers to debate and discuss and connect with their audiences. And therefore brands want to piggyback that. They want to piggyback that authenticity. So this allows me then to take the conversation neatly on to explore the next stepping stones in the development of influencer marketing. Why is it developed, and what has been the trigger? One of the triggers is the giveaway in terms of the 11 billion pounds size of the industry from Forbes. But also just think about the rise of different social media platforms. And we're talking a very short period of time, as you can appreciate. Facebook launched February 2004, YouTube February 2005, Twitter July 2006, Weibo August 2009, Instagram 2010, just October 2010, Instagram launched, Twitch same time 2010, TikTok September 2016. And we've spent the last 2 years, obviously, being influenced by a global pandemic. So you can only think where these platform technologies are going to take us to next, and you can only think really the role of the influence or play as part of those technologies. So out of this and the rise and the development of effectively of the rapid uptake and the rapid development of technology, similar to the graphic revolution, we see those milestones of platforms being developed that allows individuals to move from being ordinary and normal and going through a celebritization process, as Olivia Dreesens would say, and then become micro-celebrities, and they become talkers and authentic around a particular issue that they become famous or quasi-famous for. So let's just talk about the attention economy and how that's built up off the back of this rapid change in new technology. So it's an approach to business management that treats human attention as a scarce commodity. As content has grown dramatically and immediate, attention has become the limiting factor. Quite simply, an oversupply of information leads to a poverty of attention. And in an information age, human attention is a scarce commodity. The influential now had to influence in a congested, chaotic, global media landscape where public opinion could alter in an instant, social environmental movements could be created in an hour, and associated lobbying campaigns quickly followed. Out of this chaotic, voiced, democratic social media environment emerged platform technologies that made the ordinary, the normal, the influencers of tomorrow. The concept of reality television spawned thousands of ordinary and talented heroes. These were not the manufactured celebrities of a Hollywood or Bollywood that we'd seen at the start of the 1900s, 1920s, and 1930s. These were people like us, people whom we could relate toward. In the attention age, reality stars were getting all the starlight. It was something not lost on the promotional industries. Quickly, agents signed up these new forms of fame and packaged them as the next new commodity of the attention age, ripe for never-ending forms of pseudo-news opportunities. From Big Brother to Popstar, X Factor to I'm a Celebrity, Gogglebox to First Dates, and on in many countries all around the world. It's a phenomenon. And then a plethora of technology platforms, as I've just identified, in mid-2000s, paved the way for influencers that we see today. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Weibo, the ordinary in a cultural change moment, celebrity cultural theorist Graham Turner describes as the demotic turn. So he identifies this switch of using or the development of new technology where influencers and micro-celebrities are effectively coming from the ordinary and becoming or attaching fame to themselves through their own media channels that they can own and they control. Graham Turner identified this moment culturally as a demotic turn, with individual channels to fame. As the platforms became more sophisticated, so did the fortunes of these influencers. According to Nessman, this demotic moment was an element forming a part of a larger and new personality market. This comprised a market of celebrities, the media, audiences, and consultants, all supporting every element of that personality market. And in turn, this personality market is a planet under the wider universe of the current attention age. So just to think of the etymology really of the word influence, it's a Latin word, means to inflow or to flow in as a noun. It is linked to power and the ability of someone or something to affect, manipulate, or control another's thoughts, decision-making, attitudes, and social conduct. So I think it's quite interesting there that we talk about the specific meaning of the word influence as an influencer, as an inflow or to flow in. And then we're talking about the whole notion of the attention economy and that ability that we have very little attention. Our attention span is very, very little. So the marketing organizations are clearly identifying influencers as a way of holding people's attention for the longest period of time that they can. And on both sides of that opportunity, both elements are creating and making money. And I just want to identify here, when we talk about making money, I just did some research quickly on the highest paid Instagram users in 21. And the top 10 were these: Cristiano Ronaldo, Dwayne Johnson, Ariana Grande, Kylie Jenner, Selena Gomez, Kim Kardashian, Lionel Messi, Beyonce Knowles, Justin Bieber, and Kendall Jenner. They were the top 10. Of those top 5, this is what they earn per post. So this is what you and I would do for per post on an Instagram page. We might put a picture out there and try and get some attention or try and get some interest. So Ronaldo, as the highest paid Instagram user, per post is paid $600 to $1 million per post. Dwayne Johnson, $500 to $850,000 per post. Ariana Grande, a mere $500 to $800,000. Kendall Jenner, $490,000 to $820,000. Selena Gomez, $480,000 to $805,000 per post. And when you think of the number of posts that you do during a week, or you think of the type of connections that you have with certain audiences, you see the significance of this landscape. I mean, clearly these are global sports stars, global film stars, and you have global music stars. These are significant global celebrities that we either interact with, we know the work that they do. But the amount of money that they can earn per post, and that's just via the Instagram platform, let alone any of the other social platforms that they use, is incredibly significant. And also, more importantly, out of that is micro celebrities who are part of that, also make significant amounts of money. So people can be financially independent. You know, it creates great opportunities for people as well. That are maybe poorly educated, but they have good things to say and interesting things to say about certain things, certain aspects of life that people like, and they can create a living out of that. That's a good thing. So I just wanted to highlight some of those elements, just in terms of the amount of money that's there. And I'm just conscious of time. We're on 38. And I just want to highlight one of the campaigns to talk about an updating, really, of Bernays' work, but a campaign that's carried out by Red Bull. And this was 2012, but it gives us some idea of an updated version of how a global brand would use an influencer to connect to a target audience. And this global campaign was Red Bull Stratos campaign. You may or may not have come across this, but effectively it's a fundamental stunt. You know, at the core of it, it's a very simple mechanic. Red Bull is a global energy drink brand. Amazing how they've packaged that as energy, that product. But the whole focus is of a stunt, you know, what Borstein would call pseudo news. But effectively, they're trying to break a world record. And this world record was to effectively send a person up in a manned balloon and to the highest altitude on the edge of space and jump back down to Earth. They selected Felix Baumgartner, who is an adrenaline sports influencer, an Austrian, who would effectively go up in a capsule and a balloon, and at a certain level and a certain height, he would then open a hatch to this capsule and then jump back down to Earth. During this time, he did break the sound barrier. His body was traveling at some point at 843 miles an hour, so that's pretty impressive. And during this world record attempt, he broke 3 world records. But the mechanic and the interesting thing behind it was that Red Bull send the balloon up with Baumgartner from mission control, very NASA-esque. I think it's quite interesting now with, you know, the individual moonshots that people are taking. All filmed live on YouTube. So their media partner was YouTube, and this was the first live broadcast between a global brand, and YouTube. 2 hours filmed live for the ascent and 10 minutes to fall back down to Earth. At the time, it was viewed live by over 9.5 million users, setting a record for live stream with the most concurrent views ever on YouTube. Baumgartner was mentored by Joseph Kittinger, who had previously held the record, and Red Bull effectively launched this story of emotion, package narrative of a influencer using this world record attempt to effectively sell and talk about Red Bull as a brand. You know, only with Red Bull that you could jump from the edge of space. It gives you wings is even their tagline, you know. So we see in that debauched society, the spectacle being created, fantastical attention seeking while packaging what is far from an energy drink, with an authentic adrenaline sports influencer to persuade millions of potential customers. The Red Bull products allow you to do this and also follow what Felix does. A classic case, I'd argue, of averting the gaze, but in pure marketing terms, the campaign is absolute genius. But obviously there's flip sides to that. You know, we've got issues around regulation. You've seen, or you could potentially look at the issue of Logan Paul, you know, a significant influencer, just 26 years of age, a YouTuber with 23 million subscribers, who caused controversy in the LGBTQ community, and also for other things that he's done, filmed live on his YouTube channel. But then he, in a sense, he's averted the gaze by moving into boxing, and he does pay-per-view boxing matches to a global audience. And the last one was with Floyd Mayweather, where significant amounts of money were made for both Logan Paul and for Mayweather, and bypassing the traditional forms of media delivery. There are also other issues related to regulation, whereby Cara Delevingne, the famous model, and her sister Poppy were both paid to go to an island in the South Sea oceans, and this was a new tourist resort that was being developed. So Cara and Poppy Delevingne, along with all their friends, about 20 of them who had significant social media impact and social media following, all the firm that owned the island, all they asked them to do was that everything was free for 2 weeks, but you just got to post about the holiday and the great time you were having. At no time did Delevingne, sister, or anybody within the group say that this was being paid for effectively by a brand, by an organization, to effectively package a new tourist destination. The tourist destination was booked up from that for about the next 2 years, but no time at all did they identify that they were being paid to plug or paid to promote this particular product and service. So, in closing, the influential have always sought to influence society in the court of public opinion. They have the tools at disposal, money, time, education, and a legal right, to create, as Debord would argue, a society of the spectacle, where audiences gazed on the fantastical while power got on with what it wanted to do. And I think influencer culture, influencer economy is part of this. Marketing, the rise of the modern day digital influencer, they don't stay in the dark shadows as Bernays it did in the past, where the cultural industries and the propaganda and the stunts that Bernays did was very hidden from public view. Influencer culture, which I think is a positive thing, is very much out of the shadows. They are known, it's authentic, and it's real. They are their own content creators, influencing, I would say, in plain sight. So what are the next steps? Can anything else of human life be commodified? What does this tell us about human desire? Was Freud right? Is Bernays right? What is our own agency on this? And should there be a refocusing and broadening of academic attention to embrace promotional literacy as an extension of media literacy? So I'm just bang on my 11:45, and that sort of brings me to the end, really. So my mantra is to say that as an academy, I would really like us to extend this whole notion of media literacy and promotional literacy. I think that the future of the influencer is very powerful. Brands see them as incredibly important to their health and well-being, and therefore I only see that market growing on a global basis. And I would really, really welcome any opportunity of partnering to carry out some more global research on the basis of that. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank you all for your attention, and I'd like to finish there. If you've got any questions, that's great. I understand if you're probably quite tired now. You've had a long day, and you've got more coming tonight. So I do appreciate that, and I can leave contact details as well via the organisers. So thank you for your time, everybody.
Hi, Elliot. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm glad to see you in the very decent glass reflection. I can see the weather outside. It's very wonderful. I can imagine how the weather looks like in UK now.
Yeah, I live right by the sea, so I think it's the reflection of the sea. I'm looking at I can see the sea.
Correct. I can see from your glass reflections. I'm just wonder. All right, Elliot, I just have one question, because when I was in the roles, I noticed there are so many products with a zero packaging design, which maybe highlight these kind of a zero waste philosophy a lot. And I think nowadays we also talk a lot about the climate change, especially after the Glasgow Climate Change Conference. We have this kind of a wonderful agreement. How will you see this kind of a trend in terms of design and marketing in relation to the climate change?
And the role of influencers plays in climate change? Do you mean?
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, very much so. I mean, I think a lot of well, I suppose from a commercial perspective, a lot of brands are working with influencers that are environmentally conscious. I mean, from a business perspective, if you look at the World Surf League was bought by a venture capital company in 2015. So it bought it for $30 million. You know, and it's a global sports. So they've created it into a global sports franchise. But right at the center of that offering is a whole package and raft of environmental work that organization does through its surfers. So they celebrify their surfers. The surfers are influencers in their own right, but they carry out research into coral bleaching globally, and they also carry out research into the erosion of corals reefs all around the world via all of the stops they do on the World Surfing Tour. So I think, yes, you know, the environmental work that brands do and connect with is authentic and real in a lot of areas, and audiences are demanding it as well. So, you know, I think that's just going to continue deepening, and also counters misinformation, right? I mean, you know, you've got a large global audience where this is a very live debate, where, you know, a range of a majority of people are trying to solve the puzzle, and you've got a range of other people saying, you know, this is misinformation and there isn't an issue. So, you know, influencers are powerful in that context as well. So,
yeah, wonderful. So maybe we can open the floor to the other participants.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peel, for your interesting speech. So, yeah, if you have anything to add or any comments to Dr. Peel, you are free to raise your thoughts, or else you can put it via the chat box as well. So, any questions, any comments?
I'm just putting my email up. So if people want to reach out and get in touch, if they want a research partnership or something.
Yeah, that would be great.
There you go. I've sent that. Should go around. There you go.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Peel has shared his email contact. So if anyone is interested in connecting with Dr. Peel, you can connect, and please do not hesitate to contact Dr. Peel for any clarification or anything that you want to ask. So perfect. I hope everything is clear. And thank you very much, Dr. Peel, for sharing wonderful insights.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.